In the peaceful village of Otuoma, surrounded by tall palm trees and red soil roads, there lived a young woman named Adiz. Everyone in the village knew her name. She was known not only for her beauty but also for her calm spirit and gentle heart. She had a smile that made even the grumpy elders soften. Adiz worked as a weaver, and every morning she would sit beneath the big mango tree near her father's house, spinning bright threads into beautiful cloth. Her hands were skilled, and people from other villages came to buy her work. But there was something strange about her story. Though she was admired by many, every man who came to ask for her hand in marriage ended up leaving after just one visit. The first was Emeka, a yam farmer. He brought gifts of tubers and palm wine to her father, Chief Nana. But the next day he left the village without saying goodbye. Then came Uche, a trader who sold colorful beads. He stayed for 2 days, smiling and talking with Adiz, but suddenly he disappeared. Later came Tund, the young teacher from the next town. He seemed kind and respectful, but after one evening in Adiz's home, he too vanished without a word. The people of Otuoma began to talk. In markets, at the stream, under the moonlight, everywhere tongues wagged. "That girl," one old woman said while pounding fufu, "there is something about her. How can so many men come and run away?" Another replied, "Maybe her mother's spirit still haunts the house. Did you not hear how her mother died suddenly after childbirth?" Others said, "She looks too perfect. Maybe she is not even human." The whispers reached Adiz's ears. At first she tried to ignore them. She focused on her weaving, on caring for her father, and on helping the elderly neighbors. But at night, when the moonlight crept into her room, she would lie awake and wonder what was wrong. "Why do they all leave?" she asked herself. "Is it me? Or is there something I cannot see?" Her father, Chief Nana, noticed her sadness. One evening as they sat outside watching the stars, he said gently, "My daughter, you are beautiful and kind. Do not let the talk of others trouble your heart. A good man will stay when the time is right." Adiz smiled faintly. "I try not to think of it, Papa, but it hurts. Every time I hope, I am left alone again." He nodded slowly, his face thoughtful. People fear what they do not understand. But the truth always shows itself in time. The next morning, as the cock crowed and the sun rose over the hills, Adiz returned to her work. She hummed softly, her fingers moving swiftly across the loom. Yet, deep down, she carried the weight of the whispers that floated around her. Even when she laughed with her friends, she could see the curious glances, the half-hidden smiles. Then one afternoon, something happened that made the gossip even worse. A group of women came to her shop to buy fabric. Among them was Mama Ibube, the most talkative woman in the village. As she held up a piece of cloth, she asked in a playful tone, "Adiz, tell us truly, what do you say to those men that makes them flee like goats from fire?" The women laughed, but Adiz only smiled politely. "Maybe they find better cloth elsewhere," she replied softly. Her answer made them laugh even more, but Mama Ibube's eyes narrowed. "No, my dear. Men do not fear beauty, unless beauty hides something." When they left, Adiz sat quietly for a long time. The laughter of the women still echoed in her mind. She had done nothing wrong, yet she was treated like a secret, like a mystery no one wanted to solve. A few weeks later, during the village festival, Adiz dressed in her finest wrapper and went to join the celebration. The drums beat loud, and the air smelled of roasted maize and palm wine. Many young men danced near her, but when she smiled or tried to join them, they stepped back shyly. She noticed their discomfort but didn't let it show. She continued to dance, her feet moving gracefully to the rhythm. As the night grew darker, her father watched her from afar. He could see both pride and pain in her eyes. He whispered to his friend, "She deserves joy, but fate hides something from us. There is a reason for all this." That night, when everyone had gone to bed, Adiz sat by her window. The moonlight fell softly on her face. She thought of all the men who had come, their laughter, their sudden fear, their silence. She could not understand it. She whispered to herself, "If I am cursed, let me know. If I am not, let the truth come soon." Her words floated into the night like a prayer. And though no one heard her, something in the stillness of the air felt like an answer waiting to be revealed. The days went by quietly. People still talked, but Adiz had learned to walk with calmness. Children ran to her for sweets, old women came to her for cloth. The village saw her beauty every day but failed to see her pain. Then one afternoon, while Adiz worked beneath her mango tree, a man passed by. He was tall, with kind eyes and gentle steps. He stopped and watched her weave for a while. When she looked up, he smiled. "You weave like the wind," he said softly. Adiz smiled back, surprised by his voice. "And who are you, stranger?" "My name is Obinna," he said, "a carpenter from the next village. I came to fix the chief's roof." Adiz nodded politely. "Then welcome, Obinna. The chief's roof has been waiting for someone strong enough to face it." He laughed quietly. "And maybe I've found someone whose heart is stronger than wood." For the first time in many months, Adiz's smile was real. She didn't know it then, but this meeting would begin to uncover the secret behind why all her suitors had run away, and why her story was never about a curse, but about courage misunderstood. The villagers, watching from afar, saw the two of them talking under the tree. And once again whispers began. But this time Adiz did not care. She looked at Obinna, and for the first time she felt a small spark of hope return to her heart. As the moon changed and seasons passed, Adiz's story spread through every corner of Otuoma. People had turned her life into a tale told at firesides and market stalls. Women whispered when she walked by, pretending to smile but their eyes full of curiosity. "Such a pretty girl," they said softly, "yet no man stays. There must be something about her." Some claimed her beauty was a trap. Others said she had a shadow following her, one that frightened men away before morning came. Adiz walked through the market as if she didn't hear them, but the words stung her heart like thorns. The traders' wives would pretend to greet her kindly, but as soon as she turned, they leaned toward each other to gossip again. The children who once ran to her weaving mat to watch her work now stared in silence, their mothers pulling them away gently. "Don't get too close," they would whisper. "You never know." At home, her father, Chief Nana, noticed her growing quietness. He was a respected elder, proud of his daughter, but the rumors worried him deeply. One night, as the crickets sang and the moonlight filled their small yard, he called her outside. She came, holding her weaving thread in her hands, her face calm but tired. "My daughter," he began softly, "you are good and gentle. But tell me, why do men fear you? Why do they come and go like wind that leaves no trace?" Adiz smiled sadly. "Papa, maybe they are not meant for me. Or maybe they listen more to the mouths of others than to their own hearts." Her father looked at her long and hard. He wanted to believe her, but the pain in her voice made his chest heavy. "You are strong," he said at last, "but even the strongest hearts need to be understood." That night, Adiz could not sleep. She thought of the faces of the men who had once come with smiles, Emeka with his laughter, Uche with his beads, Tund with his books, all of them leaving without a word. She remembered how each of them had started looking uneasy after meeting her father, as if something unseen had whispered in their ears. She wondered if they had seen something she hadn't. A few weeks later, a new man arrived in Otuoma. His name was Obinna, a carpenter from the nearby town of Nkolo. He came to repair the roof of Chief Nana's compound. He was tall, quiet, and strong, his hands rough from years of work, but his voice soft. The villagers liked him immediately. When Obinna first saw Adiz, she was sitting under her mango tree, weaving a cloth of deep red and gold. The wind lifted strands of her hair, and the light danced on her face. She looked up briefly and their eyes met. She gave a polite smile and returned to her work. He nodded slightly, saying nothing. 4 days he worked on the roof while Adiz wove her cloth nearby. They rarely spoke, but sometimes their eyes met and both smiled quietly. He noticed how she helped an old woman who passed by carrying a heavy basket, how she gave a little boy a piece of bread, and how she spoke gently to everyone, even those who avoided her. In the evenings, when the sun began to set, Obinna would pack his tools and sit near the mango tree for a short rest. One day he said, "You work with patience. Not many people still do that." Adiz smiled. "And you fix things with care. Not many people do that either." He chuckled. "Maybe we are both strange in our own way." His words made her laugh, a sound she hadn't shared with a man in a long time. The next morning, when Obinna came to continue his work, he found her weaving again. "You never rest?" he asked. She shrugged playfully. "If I rest too much, who will make the colors of the village?" He laughed and nodded, but then he noticed something else, a group of market women passing by, whispering and pointing toward Adiz. Their voices were low but sharp. He could hear them saying, "Look at her, the one who drives men away. Let's see how long this one stays." He frowned but said nothing. Later that day he asked one of the young men in the village, "Why do people talk about her like that? Has she done something wrong?" The young man shook his head quickly. "No one knows. But all her suitors leave suddenly. Some say her mother cursed her before dying. Others say she's too proud or maybe has a dark spirit following her. I don't know the truth, brother, but I would not go too close if I were you." Obinna nodded but kept silent. In his heart he didn't believe the rumors. There was something honest in Adi's eyes, something that could not be hidden by lies. As the days went by, he began to visit her weaving spot more often. Sometimes he brought her fresh palm nuts or stories from his village. She found comfort in his company. "You do not fear me like the others," she said one evening as the sun went down. He smiled softly. "Fear? Why should I fear a woman who gives bread to hungry children?" Adiz laughed quietly. "The villagers think I am cursed. That is why all the men ran away." Obinna looked thoughtful. "Sometimes people run not because they see a curse, but because they fear what they don't understand. Maybe they saw your strength and it frightened them." His words stayed in her heart long after he left that night. For the first time in years she felt seen, not as a mystery but as a person. Over the next few weeks, Obinna continued visiting and their bond grew. He helped her father repair the fence, joined Adiz in selling her cloth at the market, and listened to her stories. Slowly the village began to notice. The whispers returned, sharper than before. "Another man has fallen for her," Mama Ibube said with a smirk. "He will run soon like the others." But Obinna did not run. He stood by her, silent but strong even when others warned him. And Adiz began to feel that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Still, something remained hidden, waiting quietly in the shadows of her past, a truth neither of them yet knew. And that truth would soon reveal why every man before had left, and why Obinna's courage would be tested in a way the village had never seen. The days in Otuoma grew warmer as Obinna's visits became more frequent. He followed the old custom, visiting Adiz's home 3 times before making his true intentions known. Each visit brought him closer to her heart, and yet he could feel there was something unspoken in the air, something hidden behind her calm smile. On his first visit, the evening had passed peacefully. He had eaten yam and palm stew with her father and listened to stories of the village. Adiz had sat quietly beside them, smiling softly whenever her father spoke. Obinna had left that night with a light heart, already certain that he wanted to return. But on his second visit the air felt different, thick and quiet as though the night itself was holding its breath. The moon hung low over the forest, casting silver shadows across the compound. After dinner, Obinna and Adiz sat outside beneath the mango tree. Fireflies danced in the air around them, their faint light blinking like tiny stars. They talked softly about simple things, his carpentry work, her weaving, and the colors she loved most. Obinna found comfort in her voice, so calm and warm. The night was still until, suddenly, a long, strange cry broke through the forest. It was unlike any sound Obinna had heard, not an animal, not a bird, but something human, heavy with pain and longing. He stiffened, his eyes darting toward the trees. "That sound?" he whispered. "What is it?" Adiz did not move. Instead, she smiled gently, though her eyes held sadness. "It is my brother," she said quietly. "He cannot walk or speak, but he loves to make noise when he sees visitors." Obinna's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Your brother?" Before he could ask more, a rustling came from the shadows near the forest's edge. Slowly, a man crawled out from the darkness. The firelight touched his face. His eyes were bright and full of joy, though his legs dragged lifelessly behind him. His hands were rough from crawling and his clothes were worn. Yet, when he saw Adiz, his face lit up with a smile that shone brighter than the moon. Obinna watched as Adiz rose and hurried toward him. "Kelechi," she said softly, her voice full of love, "you should be resting." Kelechi laughed, a broken, happy sound that came from his chest, not his throat. Adiz knelt beside him, wiped the dust from his arms, and helped him sit under the mango tree. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder, her eyes full of pride and tenderness. Obinna sat still, unsure of what to say. He had not expected this. The villagers had whispered that Adiz carried a secret, but none had ever spoken of her brother. He now understood the looks, the rumors, the fear that followed her name. She turned to him and spoke softly, as if confessing a truth she had carried for too long. "This is Kelechi, my brother. When we were children he fell ill and his legs never healed. Many men who came before you ran away when they saw him. They said I was cursed, that no husband should marry a woman who carries such a burden." Obinna's chest tightened. He looked at Kelechi again, the way his eyes followed Adiz with love and trust. He realized that she had been living not with a curse but with courage. He stood and walked closer, kneeling beside them. "May I greet you, Kelechi?" he said softly. Kelechi smiled again, nodding quickly, his fingers tapping the ground with excitement. Obinna extended his hand. Kelechi reached up, gripping it with surprising strength. The air between them seemed to shift, filled with understanding and quiet respect. Adiz watched them, her heart full. "No man has ever greeted him," she whispered. They all turned away. Obinna looked at her, his voice steady and kind. "Then they were blind. They saw a burden, but I see love. You are blessed, not cursed." For a moment, silence wrapped around them. The night seemed to hold its breath again, but this time in peace. The fire crackled softly, and Kelechi laughed, a pure, happy sound that filled the compound. Chief Nana, who had been sitting quietly inside, stepped out just then. He saw the three of them under the mango tree, his daughter, her brother, and the man who had not run away. His heart swelled with quiet pride, though he said nothing. He simply nodded once and went back inside. Later, as the night deepened, Adiz and Obinna remained outside. Kelechi had fallen asleep, resting against her lap. The stars glittered above them and a soft wind rustled through the trees. "Now you know my secret," Adiz said at last. "If you choose to leave, I will understand." Obinna turned to her, his voice calm. "I will not leave. How could I? You have a heart big enough to hold love that others would run from. That is not something to fear." She looked at him in silence, unsure if she believed his words. So many men had spoken kindly at first, until they saw her brother. But something in Obinna's eyes felt different, real. When it was time for him to leave, Adiz walked him to the gate. The moonlight followed them like a soft lamp. At the gate he stopped and looked at her. "I will come again," he said. She smiled faintly. "Many have said that before." He grinned. "Then let me be the one who keeps his word." As he walked away, she stood watching until he disappeared down the path. Her heart felt lighter than it had in years, but fear still lingered, a small voice whispering, "What if he too changes his mind?" That night, she prayed under the stars, asking the spirits of her ancestors to give him strength and understanding. Meanwhile, in his small home in Nkolo, Obinna sat on his bed, thinking of her words, her courage, and the brother who smiled without speaking. He knew then that his visit had not been just a test for her, it had been a test for him too. A test of heart, of patience, of seeing love beyond fear. And as dawn began to rise, Obinna made his decision. He would return, not as a visitor but as a man ready to stand by her side, no matter what the world said. When morning came to Otuoma, the air carried a new kind of silence, one filled with surprise and a little shame. The truth about Adiz and her brother had begun to spread. At first it was only the children who whispered about what Obinna had seen under the mango tree, but soon the story reached every ear in the village. Women who once avoided her weaving stall at the market now looked at her differently. They had spent months repeating cruel rumors, that she was cursed, that spirits followed her, that no man would ever stay. But now they learned that the cries from her compound were not from a ghost, but from her brother, Kelechi, a man who could not walk or speak, yet had a heart full of laughter. The same mouths that had gossiped began to fall silent. Shame spread quietly through the town like wind through grass. "So it was her brother all along," they murmured. "We were the blind ones, not her." But Adiz did not rejoice at their silence. She did not mock them or remind them of their cruelty. Instead, she walked through the market as she always did, calm, kind, and graceful. When people greeted her now, she smiled and returned their greetings with warmth. Her spirit had always been gentle, even when their words were not. Meanwhile, Obinna continued to visit her home. He helped repair the fence and built a small wooden seat under the mango tree, where Kelechi loved to sit. Every evening they talked and laughed together, the three of them, Adiz weaving, Obinna carving wood, and Kelechi humming softly beside them. Chief Nana often watched them from his veranda. His heart, once heavy with worry, now felt light. He had feared that no one would ever see the worth of his daughter, that her love for her brother would always be mistaken for weakness. But now he saw her joy returning, and that was enough to make an old man's soul rest easy. One night, under the glow of an oil lamp, Obinna sat with Chief Nana. The air smelled of roasted corn and wood smoke. "Sir," Obinna began, his voice steady, "I have come to speak of something important." Chief Nana smiled knowingly. "You wish to speak of my daughter?" "Yes," Obinna said, nodding. "I have watched her heart, not her face. I have seen how she carries love like a light, for her family, her brother, and even for those who wronged her. I do not want riches, I do not want fame. I want a woman who knows the meaning of true love. And that woman is Adiz." For a moment, Chief Nana said nothing. Then slowly he nodded. "Obinna, my daughter has suffered from the lies of others. But if your words are true, then I believe you are the answer to my prayers. You may speak to the elders when the market day comes." When that day finally arrived, the village gathered under the great baobab tree. The market was lively with color and sound, traders shouting prices, children running with sweets, drums beating in the distance. Yet when Obinna stepped forward to address the elders, all noise seemed to fade. He stood tall, his hands firm but calm. "My name is Obinna, son of Udo, the carpenter of Nkolo. I have come to ask for the hand of Adiz, daughter of Chief Nana." A murmur rose from the crowd. Some of the elders exchanged glances, the same men who once warned their sons to stay away from her. Obinna waited until silence returned, then continued. "I do not ask to marry her because she is perfect," he said. "I ask because she understands love better than anyone I have ever met. Where others saw shame, she showed courage. Where others turned away, she stayed loyal to her brother. That is the kind of woman I want beside me, one whose heart sees beyond what the eyes can judge." The words hung in the air, soft but powerful. For a long moment no one spoke. Then one of the oldest elders, his beard white as cotton, nodded slowly. "Young man," he said, "you speak with wisdom beyond your years. And as for Adiz, she has taught us all a lesson. We judged her unfairly, but she never returned our cruelty. She deserves the happiness she has found." The rest of the elders nodded in agreement. Soon, others began to clap, first the young women, then the men, then the whole crowd. The market that had once whispered about Adiz now sang her praise. She stood at the edge of the gathering, her eyes shining with tears she tried to hide. For the first time in a long while she felt seen, not for what people thought she was, but for who she truly had always been. Kelechi, sitting nearby in a wooden chair Obinna had built for him, clapped his hands together and laughed loudly, his joy filling the air. The sound was no longer seen as strange, it was music, a symbol of love that had survived judgment. That evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, Obinna walked Adiz home. The road was long but warm, lined with fireflies and the scent of ripe fruit. He reached for her hand and she let him hold it. "I told you," he said with a smile, "that I would keep my word." She smiled too, her voice soft. "And I told you that many said the same before. But none of them saw you the way I do," he said. "Not with fear but with truth." When they reached her gate, Kelechi was already waiting, his eyes bright with happiness. He made a sound, a joyful hum, and clapped his hands as if blessing them both. Adiz knelt beside him and whispered, "We are not alone anymore, brother. Our story has changed." Obinna placed his hand on both their shoulders. "Your story changed because you never stopped believing in love," he said. And from that day forward the people of Otuoma spoke differently. When they told Adiz's story, it was no longer with gossip or pity, but with admiration. They would say to their children, "Do not judge what you do not understand. Sometimes, the heart that seems burdened carries the greatest strength of all." For Adiz and Obinna, the days that followed were simple and full of peace. Their laughter once again filled the air under the mango tree, and in the evenings, when the wind blew softly through the leaves, it carried not whispers of shame, but songs of love and truth. The morning of Adiz's wedding dawned bright and golden, the kind of day when even the wind seemed to hum with joy. The village of Otuoma had not seen such a celebration in years. From the palm trees to the rooftops, every corner was dressed in color. Drummers began to beat their talking drums before the sun was fully up, and women with baskets of flowers filled the air with sweet scents. In the courtyard of Chief Nana's compound, Adiz sat quietly as her friends tied the final beads into her hair. Her wrapper was woven from the finest cloth she had made herself, soft, blue, and lined with white patterns that shimmered in the light. Her smile was gentle but strong, and in her eyes rested both peace and pride. Kelechi sat beside her, his legs covered with a new white cloth. His eyes followed her every movement, shining with love. Every so often he clapped softly, a small sound that carried deep joy. Adiz turned to him and said softly, "Brother, today you will sit beside me. The world will see that you are my joy, not my shame." The courtyard soon filled with people. Friends, family, and even those who had once whispered behind her back. The drummers played louder as Obinna arrived with his family, bringing gifts of yams, palm wine, and fine cloth. The women ululated, the children ran around in excitement, and the men laughed heartily. But amid all the noise, Adiz's heart was calm. She looked at Obinna as he walked toward her. His eyes met hers, steady and kind. When he reached her, he bowed before her father, then turned to her with a smile. "Today," he said softly, "we begin a story written not by gossip but by truth." The ceremony began under the big mango tree, the same place where Adiz used to weave and where Obinna had first spoken kindly to her. The pastor's voice rose above the music. "Marriage," he said, is not only a joining of two hearts but of two stories, one that will teach others to see beyond what their eyes can judge. As the vows were spoken, the villagers watched closely. Even those who once mocked her could not hold back their smiles. Adi's face glowed with grace, and Obina's voice was firm as he promised to love and protect her. When the pastor finally said, "You may seal your vows," the crowd erupted in cheers. Kelechi clapped his hands together with excitement, laughing loudly. The sound of his laughter carried through the air, clear and full of life. For a moment, Adiz closed her eyes, letting it fill her heart. It was the same sound that had once scared suitors away, now it was the music that blessed her new beginning. After the ceremony, the feast began. Long tables were filled with steaming dishes, pounded yam egusi soup, grilled fish, and jollof rice that smelled of spice and smoke. The women sang traditional songs and the men danced around the fire. Obina and Adiz moved together in rhythm, their hands clasped tightly. Then when the crowd called for a toast, Adiz stood up. Her golden wrapper caught the light, and her voice, calm yet strong, silenced the chatter. "My people," she began, "today you have shown me love. But I must tell you something from my heart. When my suitors ran away, I thought maybe God had forgotten me. I did not know he was only waiting to show me the right man, one who would not run from my truth." She paused and looked around at the faces that had once turned away from her. "Let no one call another cursed because of kindness," she said clearly. "Love does not run from burdens, it carries them. My brother who you once feared is not my shame. He is my blessing. He taught me patience and through him I learned what real love means." The crowd listened in silence. Some of the women wept quietly, dabbing their eyes with their scarves. Chief Nana stood proudly, his chest lifted, his eyes glistening with tears. "My daughter speaks wisdom," he said. "Today we have all learned something that no wealth can buy." Obina placed his arm around her shoulders and added, "What others called a burden, I call a gift. I am not marrying Adiz alone, I am marrying her heart, her courage and the love she gives freely." The crowd erupted into cheers and applause. Drums began to beat again, faster and louder than before. Children danced in circles while the elders nodded with respect. As the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink, Adiz sat beside her brother and husband. Kelechi's eyes sparkled as he reached for her hand. She held it tightly, smiling as she watched the villagers dance. From that day, people in Otuoma stopped speaking carelessly about others. The story of Adiz and Obina became a lesson told from one generation to the next. Parents told their children, "Remember Adiz, whose suitors ran away until truth stayed." Women at the market would smile when they saw her pass and say, "There goes Adiz, the woman whose heart was stronger than gossip." Even the old men who once warned their sons against her now bowed their heads in greeting when she passed. Her kindness, once mistaken for weakness, had become her crown. Years later, when the mango tree grew larger and its shade spread across her compound, Adiz would sit beneath it, weaving her colorful cloth while Kelechi sat beside her, humming softly. Children would come to play near them, asking to hear her story again. She would smile, look up at the rustling leaves and say, "The world will always talk. But remember, only you can decide what story your heart will tell." And when she looked toward her husband and brother, her heart would fill with quiet joy. The love that had once been doubted now stood firm, stronger than words, deeper than wounds and brighter than any lie. In Otuoma, the sound of gossip had faded long ago, replaced by laughter and song. And every time the people saw Adiz walking through the market with Obina on one side and Kelechi on the other, they would smile and say, "There goes the woman whose heart was stronger than gossip."